Hi ho, Avi the vlogger here, and today I am exploring BDSM in the autistic brain and what might be so interesting about BDSM to people who are neurodivergent. Hello, welcome to Coffee with Avi Law. On this channel, we discuss neurodivergence and greater living. I'm Aviana Lemire, and I'm being silly because a shout out if you know who I'm talking about. If you don't know who I'm talking about when I say hi ho, Avi the vlogger here, I'm just gonna say it's not easy being green. I might disclose it later because I know it's ridiculous to have a clue if you have no idea what it is and you don't feel like looking it up, but I feel like a lot of people are going to know what I'm talking about. Long story short, I want to talk about, I'm trying to wrap that long story up so that it is shortened right there, but I'm just so tickled. I want to talk about BDSM, and I'm finding it almost impossible because there are 1.6 million points to talk about and they all branch in so many different directions, and there are a lot of reasons why it's a fascinating subject. So I'm going to try to limit it right now today to the concept of being accepted on the whole, because as neurodivergents, one of the things that we have a tendency to be programmed for is not being accepted. We're considered to be wrong or diseased. The way that we approach things is somehow supposed to be messed up because it's not how other people do. But we haven't traditionally looked at the way that we do things and then seen a world of people who don't do it that way and called them messed up. It's an interesting double standard. But aside from that, for whatever the reason, just on a human level, all human beings have a tendency to want to feel accepted. And when you go into the BDSM community, there's a good chance that whoever you are at all times, non-sexually oriented stuff, because I want to talk about that today, because it seems to be something where people don't necessarily know that there is a non-sexual aspect to BDSM, when in reality a whole lot of it could be that. I want that to be known because everyone is so heavily talking about the other stuff, which is very much there and very much valid, but it needs to be talked about on just a mental level and who we are and what we do on a daily basis, the way we communicate, for instance. One of the things about BDSM is that it's very well known that it is extremely encouraged to communicate, explicit communication, in the way that we do as autists, where you just want to say something clearly. And that autistic ADHD brain that I have, where I simply want to get the point out and not waste any time, and I want people to be able to understand, and I need to be able to understand, that is 100%, encouraged inside of BDSM. So you can be accepted for something like that, whereas out in the vanilla world, a lot of times people are horrified if you're talking about a subject. Like, I noticed as a child, my take on it was that everybody wanted to spend their whole life talking about sex, but no one necessarily wanted to admit that that's what they wanted to spend their whole life doing. And they walk around thinking, I was a very different child, so I process things differently, but they walk around thinking you can't understand what they're referencing or what they're talking about when they're talking about it, but they're talking about it a lot. And at the same time, when it's just brought up in clear, present, plain, honest, non-equivocal terminology, they're horrified. And inside of BDSM, one of the important things is consent, communication. Consent plus communication, quite frankly. It's kind of a constant unity of both. So even when you're talking to someone and you're just having a conversation with one person or a group of people, you might have zero interest in anything else with them. But when you are talking on the subject of that, as long as it's like, it's kind of an unspoken thing, you don't necessarily want to out somebody being kinky, so you might want to have a conversation privately. But if you're in a safe space and you're talking about BDSM, it's not necessarily expected that you're going to be unnecessarily lilting and cute in your language, that you're going to have to figure out how to encode things. Out there in the rest of the world, the NT world loves encoding as a form of communication, where everything is drifting far underneath a wave of other words that they're saying. And in BDSM, very often you can just straight up say what you mean. So if you're talking to somebody about how you would like to interact with them, either in a sexual way or in a non-sexual way. It's literally often just saying, oh, I'm into this. I would like to have at least 15 minutes of cuddling time at this time every day. You know, let's say you're in a couple. You live together and somebody gets off work. Part of your BDSM contract with them, you know, the things you agree to could literally be, we need to cuddle for 15 minutes a day. It makes me feel better, or I want to cuddle with you for half an hour, maybe while we're watching a TV show together. You can just say you need those things, and you don't have to kind of find a way to hint at it underneath a sea of other words and actions. You don't have to try to find a way to sort of sit next to them while they are watching TV and see if maybe they're open to a cuddle, because you don't want to talk about it and you don't want to bring it up and you don't want to seem needy. No, you can just straight out say, these are things that I need to feel okay. It makes me feel cozy. And after a long day when I haven't seen you, I want to touch you. I want physical contact. You could just say something like that. And a lot of times, even when people are in relationships, which you would think would be a place where you could be who you are and you could be honest. But a lot of times outside of BDSM, when people are in relationships, it's just a well-known thing. We're going to encode everything. We're not going to be straightforward about what we need or what we're going for. And people are trying to figure out how to get what they need out of a relationship they've already been in for a long time. I'm trying to say, this term pops into my head and I want to kind of explain it, but I've always said to myself all of my life, this term, vanilla sex, makes me sad. And the reason why is because out there in the whole world culture, there is that encoding level. And a lot of times people who spend their entire lives encoding and knowing this is what I'm going to do, I'm going to say one thing, I'm going to mean the other, or I'm going to say something and hope they figure out what I mean, they're not getting what they need out of relationships. They're not getting what they need out of those interactions, intimate interactions of any nature. They're not getting what they need out of sitting down with someone and having a dinner, generally in the relationship, and they keep trying to hint at it. Very often they're trying to hint and they're waiting for someone to get it. But people often just need to understand what the hint is. Even in a culture that's famous for not being outright and forthright about things. And it's just always made me so sad, especially listening to people who have a lot of experiences where they're like, you interact with someone, whether it's on a date or a hookup or whatever, and it could even be with friends. But it seems like whatever it is that they need from you, they come in and they get it and they disappear. And you're just left without whatever it is that you need from them. And one of the things inside of the BDSM community is that when you're interacting with people, and this is something that'll work if you have like personal, like a sexual relationship with someone, it's going to teach you that you actually do kind of get the right to do this in general in your life. You will get accustomed to having a safe space, I think, if you have this, where you are encouraged to say, this is what I need. This is when I need it. I'm very interested in giving you what you need, but let's be compatible so that both of us are okay with mutually fulfilling the other one's basic needs in life. You kind of get that ability to communicate in a way that is very neurodivergent, especially the autistic thing where you need to be clear and put it out there and say, I'm interested in exactly this. I want you to cuddle me, but I don't want you to tickle my shoulder because that drives me insane in a bad way. I hate it. How about you can put your hand there, but don't tickle? Literally anything. You can say, you know what it is. Sometimes it's kind of that famous thing where, autistic sensation works differently, so you might really be into someone like grabbing you and hugging you in a tight hold because that feels reassuring and comforting, but the senses are so delicate that if someone is like, I'm just going to tickle you down the arm, which feels horrible even for me to do it, it might be like, oh my, please stop, no. You can tell somebody instead of just hoping they stop. Sometimes we end up in this place where something feels horrible and you react to it and you're considered to be the weird one. Like, why are you freaking out? All I did was, oh, my hand looks so red there for a second. I was like, what is happening? It's a shadow. I thought perhaps something was wrong. Probably a shadow plus me holding a hot mug in the palm of my hand. But long story short, sometimes the way we react to things in life, people then think there's something unusual or strange about us having a reaction. And in all reality, it should be more like, oh, okay, I'm looking at you reacting in a certain way, and I'm realizing that we've never discussed this and it was out of the box. So even if it's okay, even if we're friends, even if we're in a relationship and we know it's okay to, touch, maybe that's not the touch that's good for you. So I'm just going to pocket that and not do it again. Some people will be like that. But when you're inside of the BDSM community, there is an encouragement to the concept of saying to somebody straight up front, if you're aware that you don't like a tickling sensation, you can say, in general, I never want you to tickle me. That's off the table. You can say that is a hard no. There's like a scale of no and yes, and hard no is a term that is known to mean no, it's not happening, no tickling under any circumstances. So you don't have to worry as that person who has those highly developed sensory capabilities that a lot of other people don't have and often can't understand. You don't have to worry that you're going to get your senses blasted out because the person you're in the room with loves to tickle, and maybe they'll forget. I mean, a person could forget, but you don't have to worry that they're going to forget and it's going to happen all the time, because you are encouraged to assert yourself and say, no, I don't want that. That's a hard no. And even though there are people everywhere and sometimes people do not want to respect the rules, it's generally considered inside of BDSM, if there's been clear communication, you stick with it. And if something is discovered unexpectedly and someone says no, you stick with it. It's a hard and fast rule. It's a hard line. You don't cross that. It's not considered to be BDSM if someone's actual wants and desires are being actually violated. It's just not even considered to be, that's just not cricket. It's not a thing. And I love that. It's kind of, I'm talking about being accepted, but now I'm talking about consent. And not just in sort of consent culture where the term is used a lot, but it's not necessarily always inclusive of the complexity of true lifelong consent, like what's the word I'm looking for? Holistic consent, where it's about everything. It's about sexuality. It's about platonic interactions. It's about mental well-being. In BDSM, there's greatly room for all of that stuff, because if somebody is using a term or something that you dislike, it wouldn't be unusual to be like, I happen to be particularly sensitive to this term. Let's table that for a while I think about it. Or maybe we'll try it again later. Or, you know what? My past is pretty specific on this. I don't ever want to have to hear that term coming out of your mouth. So that's a hard no for me, You can do something like that. Just in general conversation. It could be a term of endearment or just something that is bothersome to you. Maybe you want a safe space where you don't have to think about something that reminds you of things you don't want to think about, It's non-specific. I'm having a hard time even necessarily pinning down examples, and I'm trying. I hope it's working, because it's not a specific series of things. It's not entirely sexually oriented. It's just an entire relationship thing. It's an entire thing about how you interact with another person. And even if you explore that explicitly or exclusively within a sexual relationship or a romantic relationship, part of it is kind of training your brain to know, oh, it should be okay for me to be able to say no and have that respected. And people generally find, and they will share this in the BDSM community, that even if they came into BDSM thinking, I don't feel good about asserting myself, and I've been through things and I want to be quiet, and then they get in there and they see that it's okay for them to have boundaries, and it's okay for them to say no to something, and very importantly, it's okay for them to say yes to something, or to just introduce it all by themselves. They find very often that it's training them to do that in life. And maybe where it's possible and where it's safe, you find the courage to start setting up boundaries in other places. So this could be a whole life event. And for me, anything that you train your brain, your mind, your heart to accept or expect in life is going to reach far beyond any particular category in life and spill out everywhere else. So yes, the sensation of having encouraged consent and being accepted for your needs inside of BDSM, I think could clearly have an impact that could roll out like a healthy, life-giving wave of water and just lick the edges of every shore and encourage life everywhere. Because whether we're neurodivergent or not, generally, I think I said this already, but I can't recall, on a human level, everybody needs to feel accepted. Everybody wants to feel accepted on some level. And there's something about entering into a society of people who are encouraging you to be clear about your needs, the autistic style of communication, to just be clear, to state something outright, to say, this particular thing, I like that. That particular thing, I don't like that. There's something about that just being accepted all by itself. Our communication style is probably the number one. It's huge. That's how you interact with people. It's a huge thing. It's probably the number one thing about being autistic that people have an issue with. Autism is often classified as, quote, a communication disorder, end quote. So our communication being accepted anywhere is going to be massive. And I find that that happens even inside of the autistic community. When you find that, if you have a chance to go, even if, I say even if, people are like, oh, even if all you can do is go online. I went online, found an autistic community, and it literally changed my entire life. It's in something like my first or second video on this channel where I'm talking about how everything in my life changed, and finding an online community changed everything in my entire life. And I know that people have different feelings about what's going on online and how real it is and how real it's not, which is kind of funny because in a truly autistic community online, that should be one of the realer online communities that could possibly exist because of the way that we communicate. But at the same time, always exercise safety, internet safety, general safety. Do not assume that because you found BDSM online or autists online that this is such a safe place that you can disclose anything sensitive or everything about yourself. But with all of that being said, because I always do honestly want everyone to be safe, with all of that being said, there can be an incredible power to finding a community. And we live in an amazing time right now because you can find a community by accessing a tiny device that some people could have lived their entire lives without ever finding at all. Some people would be in a place where before this type of Wi-Fi connection with everybody, before the World Wide Web, which is an interesting name if you think about it, people could be living their entire lives being neurodivergent and they might not find their community. Or they might be blessed to have one person who can really relate to them and to whom they can really relate. So we're in an amazing time where we don't have to think we're alone anymore. This is why I'm making this video. For all of you watching, I'm online community. I'm just trying to make sure that I'm always online positive instead of online extremely horrendously negative. But that's in my nature. I'm not really... I just kind of naturally do that. It's just who I am. It's not really something I have to fight very hard for. So if I'm achieving it, it's not a huge achievement in my life. It's just kind of who I am and me being who I am. And part of the reason why I feel comfortable being who I am online is because I already found other people online. We're self-advocating like crazy. And there's something incredibly powerful to knowing there's someone else like you. There's someone else who can communicate in the way that you communicate. There's someone else who can understand you when you communicate. And this is something that some of us can find in the BDSM community. Gee, there's so many different aspects to get into, but I'm trying to keep it on a small subject because I know I'm going to go off like crazy and link 50,000 different issues because I just tried to record this video so many times and I linked a million different issues. So I'm just going to kind of leave it at that. I can't remember what I've said now because, like I said, I tried to record this video a few times. I found myself being accepted, and one of the huge things about it is the communication style is not necessarily going to be met the same way, because there are still going to be a mix of people, and I'm sure there are NTs in BDSM. It does seem that there are a kind of, like, there's a large incidence of neurodivergence inside of BDSM, and part of that might be because this is a place where you're accepted for the things that other people don't want to accept. But as an interesting note, it's possible that BDSM is that place because a lot of neurodivergent people have always been there. Because very often, people always kind of like to make fun of it like it's something that's going on somewhere in a dungeon. I mean, in general, like if you want to play board games as an adult with your adult friends, it's like, oh, you've gone off into your little nerd dungeon and you're doing blah, blah, blah. None of that's even bad or derogatory to me, but other people act like it is. So they're like, yeah, you're off in a dungeon away from the rest of the world. Well, guess what? That's because when we were out in the sunlight, you wouldn't stop mocking us. We have a tendency to know, as human beings, how to survive. And when someone mocks you and attacks you like crazy in the light, you're going to find some way to find solace and peacefulness hidden someplace in a dungeon, playing live action role-playing games, or whatever the name is. I do know this stuff, but I can't remember. Or being involved in kink. It's possible that all of the people who were neurodivergent and thought differently and wanted to express their needs outright and specifically and have instructions and give instructions and have those instructions be listened to and noted and lauded and paid attention to and followed, of all things. That's another one. The instructions thing, let me make a tiny little note because I don't want to forget. But I'm just thinking it's very possible that we as NDs had a heavy hand in creating the BDSM community. I don't know. Unfortunately, I can't really know unless someone has documented it, but it seems like it makes a whole lot of sense because that's the place where everyone else thinks everything is weird. And we found this place to create our own community. Well, okay, it's not accepted anywhere else. Let's go over here, see if I can find anyone else who agrees. And just like we've done as NDs online and in different forums with our blogs and our vlogs and our like autistic Twitter space and all this stuff, we seem to have created a niche where we could fit. And in BDSM, we probably had a hand in creating this niche where the unusual things could fit. But even if that's not exactly how it started, we're in there. And I think part of the reason why we're so accepted is because there are so many of us already in there, nesting and being accepted and wanting to give to others what we need ourselves. We encourage that environment, and we're a part of creating and maintaining and upholding and spreading it. And I have found a lot of other neurodivergent parties inside of BDSM. Like, I run into them in like crazy there in a way that I don't generally anywhere else in the world. I'm not even sure if I run into us that often in gaming, and that's supposed to be the place, like online. Oh, you're streaming or you're playing a game online with other people. You're interacting in that way in those forums. That should be a place where you're finding a lot of us, and I'm not even sure that I find as many of us there as I have in the BDSM community. But this thing, right, the instructions, that's going to be another part of the communication thing. I think it's 100% in there, so I'm going to go ahead and just address it because it's very deeply encouraged that you do in fact give instructions. So if you want to engage with someone, and it's going to be any form of intimacy, because intimacy it's not just a code word for sexuality, but any form of intimacy. And it doesn't matter if it is something sexually or if it is something like I was saying earlier, just you want to cuddle with somebody, or you want somebody to give you a firm embrace instead of a tickly one. They're generally, sometimes you'll have a place where you want something done in a certain way, or you want some particular thing or things omitted, and you can kind of write that stuff out. Some people will literally write things out and make a list, and they'll be like, I don't want to see this thing, I don't like that term, this particular type of touch just makes my senses go, ooh. It's not about you, it's about how my senses are responding, so please don't do that. And it's not unusual for someone to just be like, okay, I see this, I'm looking at it, maybe we want to discuss it, perhaps I'd like to know why, but at the same time, none of that is trying to get out of it, and none of that is trying to find your way out of complying. Someone might literally have a list of instructions. I have a really good example for what might be a list of instructions, actually. But none of it is trying to get out of adhering to the instructions. Often someone will look at this, sometimes people even sign contracts based on what they expect in the relationship and what they expect to give in the relationship, and they agree on it. So you kind of have, as an unintended Big Bang Theory reference, a relationship contract. It's not unheard of, and it can be a small thing. Sometimes it's a big thing. Sometimes people will play these things out like they're having a wedding ceremony because they're really committing to it and the ceremony feels nice, you know? But the thing about instructions, if you are in a relationship of some nature, and you can, like I'm always saying this, you could be asexual and or just involved in sort of an asexual relationship where that doesn't come into it, you don't want it to come in. But if you're in a situation with the extremely traditional dominant party and submissive party, you might have something where this is something that I've heard a lot, and I'm going to bring this in because it's part of like the ADHD thing. ADHDers do better. It keys into ADHDers doing better with instructions if we actually have proper instructions. Don't just tell us you need to do this, but tell us what we need to do, the different steps, break things down, and it's good to have a reminder. So I have definitely run into instances where people are saying, well, have this relationship, my partner's ADHD, and there's certain stuff that I need them to do. Like, let's say the ADHD partner is a submissive, because I'm thinking of a particular example. And I remember person being like, ADHD submissive partner needs to do certain things. Maybe you want them to journal. Maybe you want them to clean something. Because sometimes what you're doing is finding something that's really good for their life, but it doesn't feel great to do. It's difficult for them to do. And because you're now working it into your dynamic and your relationship, it gives it a different edge. There's more of an appeal. There might be a reward system in place, and it's making it, it's just focusing on something that's already good for them and working it into some kind of a contract or an agreement. So you might want to put things on that list that they want to do for themselves, like having them journal something or having them clean something at a certain point, like straighten up their work area or something like that. You can just put these things onto a list and say, when I come in to inspect every week at this time, I want this space to be clear. I want you to have these particular things put away. Let's say, I was trying to say, let's say you're an artist, but the thing is, as an artist, it can be kind of disruptive to have somebody telling you your space needs to be clear at a certain time, because that might put you in a position where when you actually have time and inspiration to create, you're actually just supposed to be cleaning. But the only thing I can think of right now is an art space, because I'm an artist and I'm really focused on that and the concept of having a good art space for myself. So even though it's not a good example, it's the only one my mind has right now. But you might have something where the ADHD submissive partner is an artist and they've got their stuff out, and you just say, I want all of your paintbrushes to be washed, because maybe they've already expressed, I forgot to clean my paintbrushes, a million things were going on, you know, blah, blah, blah. Maybe you just want to make sure that you put something like that on the list. You need to write down instructions because it's an ADHD person. So we don't just say, oh, I want your brushes to be clean. It might be something like, I want you to go into the kitchen or the bathroom, wherever. Make sure the sink is clear and clean. Get the soap ready and lay out a towel. And I want you to get your brushes and I want you to swish them out in the water and clean them. Make sure they don't dry up they don't go hard. I want those to be cleaned every week at this time. You might be coming up with something like that. It's healthy for everybody. It's specific instructions. You've broken it down well enough that you know how it works with ADHD. You're like, okay, I'm going to wash my brushes. Then you are like, oh, phooey, I got a lot of brushes. Which ones do I take? You know, maybe you have a little basket. Oh, put them in the basket and carry the brushes. Put them in the basket on top of a towel, so that if they're dirty, it doesn't ruin the basket. You know, you might have to break down specific issues, because sometimes it's like that. I want to wash my brushes. How am I going to get them to the right place? You get them to the right place. Maybe you want to wash them in the kitchen sink, and the kitchen sink is full of dishes. Now all of a sudden you can't wash them because the kitchen sink is full of dishes. So you might need to specify that you first need to go to the kitchen sink. And if it's full of dishes, you either need to wash the dishes or you need to move the dishes, right? Because the task isn't to make sure the dishes are clean. The task is to make sure the brushes are clean. Maybe later on you have a different task that's about dishes, but right now maybe you just have to move the dishes so that you've got a clean space where you can rinse the brushes, and then you can get that stuff done. And that stuff could be really helpful for somebody. It can be, I think, from my experience in life, where I was often put upon to do something, and I spent my entire life wanting and sometimes needing to do it, but there were different things in my way that stopped it. I have literally asked in an extremely upset state because I desperately wanted to be that pleasing person, and I was in a different point in my life where it's not just that I want it to be loving, I want it to be pleasing. It wasn't really healthy, but I want it to be pleasing, and that was just my truth. And I've asked in a very upset state, will you please just write it down? Because I want it to remember, but I cannot. And I didn't understand why then. My brain just wouldn't remember. So I said, please write it down. You need to write it down, because if I don't have it written down, especially when someone is going off on you, that takes a lot of time. It's very distracting. It's extremely hurtful and harmful. So by the time all that's over, I'm just heartbroken, and I just feel violated, and I feel like a pile of trash. And the thing that's going to happen then is not that I'm going to be like, okay, I feel like a piece of trash. Time to go perfectly execute everything that's required of me like I'm a pro. That's not how it worked. I tried, but it didn't work. So I've asked, I've made that request before, but it wasn't happening inside of that safe, accepted situation or relationship with clarity and communication where I got my needs met. It was all about someone else's needs getting met. So I just asked, and it was something that I've requested, clarity, make a list. Those things were never done. So of course I was never able to get this stuff done. And I'm coming to this from the dominant person's mindset, but I'm a human being. And no matter where I am inside of a relationship, even if it's like I'm saying, if it's just like a friend relationship or a family relationship, that BDSM approach of clarity, communication, some type of unspoken contract where you communicate and where I ask for a list and you actually have the gall to do it. You can deign to create the list instead of just flying off the handle about your own mental list that's only inside of your own head because you're the only one who can remember, because frankly you're the only one who cares. Like I'm gonna see to your cares, but sweet Lord in heaven, I need help. If you won't give that to me, I can't do it. And inside of BDSM, if you have a communicative and healthy relationship with someone, asking for a list is a completely doable thing. And as a matter of fact, if you are that ADHD submissive who needs that list, and you are the one who put forth the request for the list, and that dominant party just isn't willing to do that for you, it's something to pay attention to. In general in life, whether it's BDSM or vanilla community, you need to pay attention to the fact that that person wants something of you. But what they want from you is not that you can do it in a healthy way, and it's not to make it at all doable for you. Even when you're trying to help them, if someone's making it difficult for you or they refuse to lift a finger to do anything to make it not easy, but at all doable, that's something to pay attention to. It's something to take as a warning. I want to be clear, because sometimes we need to hear this clearly with our autistic brains. You need to pay attention to it, because it is not healthy for someone to want to use you and get all of the rewards without rewarding you in return. You should not be feeling actually used. Inside of kink, that term can be, oh, it's fun, let's use each other. No. When it comes down to literally how you're actually feeling, not inside of like a game or the words that fit inside of a scene, or, you know, a play scene, or inside of something that you're acting out, or something that's a fantasy. If your spirit actually feels used, unfacilitated, and unfulfilled in any kind of relationship, you need to take note of that, because it is a red flag. At the very least, some action needs to be taken to fix it. Not every bad thing is a huge red flag, like I need to get out of here. Sometimes people can work on things, but you do need to have the capacity to pay attention to something that looks like a red flag when it is one. And someone wanting you to actually feel legitimately used and violated, or to just use you and not be willing at all to do anything to make your life easier, or to make it easier for you to accommodate them, is not okay. That's not all right. But it feels like I might have come to some kind of natural end on that one. And it's going to be really interesting for me. I'm going to see if I can find my closing statement that I never have prepared. It's going to be interesting for me editing this video and seeing if I put it up, because I feel like I just went on a million different mile runs and multiple subjects and tangents, and I'm not sure that I had one example that actually made sense. But I'm about to find out, quite possibly very shortly before you find out. So, have any thoughts or questions? Share them in the comments. Notice any gaps in the autistic, ADHD, or ADHD community conversation? Want a spiritually, mystically inclusive ND voice on a subject? Just looking for an extra opinion or viewpoint? Share your suggestions in the comments. If I can address them, I might make them into a video. Remember to like, share, subscribe, ring the notification bell for all of my newest updates, and be blessed. I think that's just about everything I can think of to say right now. Hoping to make more videos on this subject, because there's so much in BDSM that could be useful or desirable for us as autists, as ADHDers. I made a list and I couldn't begin to address all of them. And it's been almost 40 minutes. So for now, that's about it. Bye now. Oh, and the reference that I made at the beginning of the video, hi-ho, Avi the vlogger here, that was a reference to hi-ho, Kermit the Frog. So anyone who remembers that, that's why I couldn't stop laughing.